Ladies and gentlemen, Happy New Year 2026 and welcome back to IK Auto Reviews after the long break. I hope you guys have all been okay, and let me also take this opportunity to thank all of you for the continued support, be it through the positive comments, the likes, shares and subscriptions. I really appreciate it. This new year we will continue talking about cars, offering consultation, car sourcing and hopefully soon to come pre-purchase inspection so that your car ownership experience can be a breeze. So this being the first episode of the year, I've decided to compare two crossovers that a significant number of you have been requesting for. These are crossovers that I would like to term as polar opposites in terms of the price range. One falls higher on the spectrum, while the other one falls towards the lower end of the spectrum. I'm talking about the Nissan X-Trail T32 and the Mazda CX-5. Today, if you decide to go for the former, you may end up saving yourself up to over 1 million Kenya shillings. But does cheap always translate to good value for money? We'll be finding out in this episode as we dissect both crossovers. Then we will conclude by giving our recommendation. So please stick around. And once again, welcome to iCave Auto Reviews. So we will be comparing 2019 models. The 2019 X-Trail is the third generation which was produced between 2013 to 2020, while the 2019 CX-5 is the second generation which was produced between 2016 till last year 2025. So beginning with the X-Trail, there are three petrol options as well as three diesel options, but getting the diesels local is very difficult because they were primarily meant for the European markets. But here in Kenya, we mostly import from Japan, Malaysia, and Singapore. So the most common options are the petrols. So the first one, which is apparently the most common, is the MR20, which is a 2000cc that produces 142 horsepower. Secondly, we have the QR25, which is a 2500cc that gives out around 170 horsepower. And lastly, there's a 2000cc hybrid, which churns out around 176 horsepower. That's the combined power output from both the engine and electric motor. You can get this crossover in either front or all-wheel drive. In terms of reliability, the 2000 and 2500cc are pretty good. With basic maintenance, they can last for a very long time, and I would recommend the 2000cc as it strikes a good balance between power and efficiency. It's good enough even for long distances, but better in terms of consumption compared to the 2500cc. The hybrid, on the other hand, is simply not good, and no wonder they aren't even that common locally. That particular powertrain can be prone to several issues, and among them is failure of the coolant pump, which can affect the hybrid system's cooling. I think that during this era, Nissan really tried to cut corners in terms of expenditure because they were so much into cost cutting. Look at even their CVTs. They have developed a reputation of inadequate cooling. But before we go into the transmissions, let me just repeat this. This hybrid is not a powertrain that I would recommend. So please just get the 2000cc. In terms of the transmissions, there are three options, but only one is very common in our market. The other two are more common in the diesel options that are exclusive to the European markets. These are the 6-speed manual and a 7-speed DCT. Locally, the CVT is more common. Now, it's already well known that this CVT is not that solid and robust because it has an inadequate cooling system, but there's a remedy for that, which I've talked about severally on the channel, and that is installation of an aftermarket CVT oil cooler. I would go further and advise that for even better peace of mind, you install a temperature gauge so that you can monitor the CVT's temperature, especially on a long journey. That is very important because in as much as you will have the aftermarket oil cooler, the temperature gauge will give you surety that the CVT is operating within its optimum temperature. So those two things are very important, and I highly recommend them if you want to have a stress-free ownership experience with the Nissan X-Trail. CVTs are generally sensitive Even those from Subaru and Toyota are sensitive, but they have better cooling systems compared to the one in the X-Trail. Still on sensitivity, always make sure you use the right CVTF, which in this particular case is NS3. Using alternatives may compromise on the operation and reliability of that CVT. Something else that I forgot to mention when talking about the engines is the oil. The recommended oil is Nissan Genuine Oil 5W30 synthetic. Though you could as well use an alternative such as Helix HX7, which is also good, but if you can, always stick to the recommended oil. Generally speaking, the X-Trail is reliable in terms of the petrol engines, and in terms of the transmission, the CVT can be relatively reliable, but only if you take the aforementioned precautionary measures. Something else is that when compared to other brands such as Toyota, Subaru, Honda and Mazda, these Nissans aren't as robust. They are cars that should be driven modestly, avoid hard accelerations at all costs, and especially on inclines. In other words, a Nissan is not as hardy as maybe a Toyota or a Mazda. Even in terms of things like bushes and other suspension components, if you want them to last, then just drive gently. Avoid pushing the car hard. Let the vehicle pick up speed gradually. As for consumption, the 2.0 liter can return between 11 to 15 kilometers per liter, the 2.5 between 11 to 13 kilometers per liter, and lastly the hybrid up to 20 kilometers per liter. All these figures will always depend on your driving style, the maintenance, and also the amount of load the vehicle is carrying. Let's now move on to the Mazda CX-5. For the 2019 model year, there are four main engine options. There's a 2000cc, which produces 162 horsepower. Secondly, there's a 2.5 liter, which churns out 187 horsepower. The third option is a turbocharged version of the 2.5 liter, which is the most powerful petrol option, and it was introduced in 2018. It gives out around 230 horsepower. Lastly, there's a 2.2 liter turbo diesel that is good for 184 horsepower and for 50 newton meters of torque. Like the X-Trail, this crossover is available in either front or all-wheel drive. The recommended engine oil is 0W20 for the naturally aspirated options, while for the turbo petrol it's 5W30. Now in terms of reliability, and especially if you just want basic point A to B transportation with reasonable efficiency, the 2000cc is your best bet. It's very decent efficiency wise for a crossover, and handling long distances isn't a problem at all for this particular engine. The 2.5 liter is certainly more powerful, but it's less efficient. But again, just like the 2.0 liter, it's very reliable. The turbo petrol is the least efficient but most powerful, and again it's not that common locally, and I reckon most people will avoid it due to its significantly high consumption. Then again, being turbocharged, strict maintenance is key. The oil changes must be done at the recommended time, and it's also important to stick to the recommended oil and parts. Lastly, the diesel option, like most modern diesels, is sensitive, but keep this in mind. With this newer generation, Mazda tried to iron out some of the issues that had plagued the previous generation, such as blown head gaskets and injector leaks. So this diesel is better in terms of reliability, but that is not to say that it's perfect. It's still a diesel, and it can be sensitive if you skip the service or use low quality oil and parts. Even DPF issues are still present, but as I've always advised, the best thing to do is just deleting it to prevent future recurrent issues to do with the DPF blockage or even replacement. Turbo failure can also occur, but that may be primarily due to poor maintenance. So essentially, strict maintenance is very key, and again, maintaining this diesel engine is more expensive compared to the 2000cc petrol. So if you want outstanding reliability and ease of maintenance, then the 2000cc is your engine. Transmission wise, Mazda always like keeping it simple, just two options, both being 6 speeds, one automatic, the other is manual. There are no CVTs here, and Mazda keep proving that you can still use the conventional automatic yet still attain good efficiency. Still on transmissions, the recommended ATF is Mazda ATF FZ. If possible, stick to that, or you could also use an alternative such as Castrol Transmax. The 2.0 liter can attain between 12 to 14 kilometers per liter. The 2.5 liter between 10 to 12ish kilometers per liter. The turbo around 8 to 11 kilometers per liter. And lastly, the diesel between 14 to around 18 kilometers per liter. The X-Trail has a 60 liter fuel tank capacity, while the Mazda has a 56 liter tank for front-wheel drive variants and a 58 liter tank capacity for the all-wheel drive variants. As for ground clearance, these are crossovers, so you'll never have to worry about scratching the undersides on normal roads. They will both glide on rough and tarmac roads and bumps, but of course not excessively huge bumps. What about the suspension setups? They both get McPherson struts at the front and multi-links at the back, but they have different tunings. The X-Trail is tuned for comfort. It's very comfortable, but slight con of that is that the body roll is a bit more significant. But again, this is not a crossover to take sharp corners in. Drive it decently and you love the comfortable ride it will offer. I would term the CX-5 suspension as a bit firm but still comfortable. It's on the firm side of comfortable, and the good thing about that is that it handles quite well. It feels more planted and sure-footed, and that also leads to minimal body roll compared to the X-Trail. As for the brakes, they both get ventilated discs at the front and at the back. The X-Trail maintains the ventilated discs, while the CX-5 gets solid discs. Generally, they have good stopping power, nothing much to complain about. The carb weight of the X-Trail is between 1540 to 1738 kgs, while that of the CX-5 ranges between 1505 to 1765 kgs. Diesel variants with all-wheel drive are the heaviest, and in case you may not know, diesel engines are normally heavier than petrol engines, and that's why diesel variants have higher carb weights. In terms of safety, these being modern family crossovers, they come packed to the brim with active safety features. As standard, they both get 6 airbags, ABS, EBD, brake assist, traction control, and hill assist. Then, as for the active safety features, most of the trim levels come with lane keeping assist, blind spot detection, radar cruise control, and rear cross traffic alert. The optional features available in higher trim levels include 360 degrees parking camera as well as adaptive headlights. So generally, both crossovers are quite safe, irrespective of whether you get a lower or upper trim level. In this day and age, automakers are really trying to make cars safe by throwing in advanced features even in the most basic of cars. So how much will each of these crossovers set you back at? The current price of a 2019 X-Trail is between 2.45 to around 2.65 million depending on the trim level, while a 2019 CX-5 is going for anywhere between 2.93 million to a whooping 4.1 million, again depending on the trim level and mileage. That's a sharp gap, and we will be talking about value for money soon. But as you digest that, let's briefly delve into the exteriors and interiors. There's no doubt that the CX-5 wins hands down in terms of the exterior design. It looks very sharp and sporty, and no wonder it appeals more to younger clientele. The X-Trail's design, on the other hand, is what I would call an okay design. It's simple and inoffensive. It's a design that appeals more to mature people with families. Onto their interiors, the CX-5 again looks and feels premium. Mazdas have really upped their game in terms of premiumness and elegance. The controls really feel tactile and of high quality, but in terms of space and practicality, it's really not the best compared to the competitors. It's decently spacious, but compared to even this X-Trail, it's not that family friendly. The X-Trail, on the other hand, is a totally different story. This crossover is simply huge. There's so much space at both the front and second rows. And remember, there are variants that even have a third row of seats for kids. It's a family-friendly crossover. That said, the dash design is basic, not interesting like that of the CX-5, but still not bad. It more than makes up for it by its spaciousness and practicality. Now quickly on to the pros and cons, beginning with the pros. The X-Trail is very comfortable, it's very spacious, its spare parts are more affordable compared to those of the competitors. It's safe and generally offers better value for money considering the price, but we will be discussing more about that very soon. On to the cons, its CVT is not that reliable as we mentioned earlier. It can suffer from overheating, sleeping, or even total failure. But as you said earlier, there are precautionary measures that can be taken. That said, in case you take the precautionary measures and the CVT still fails, the best thing to do is just buying another CVT, because even if you repair it, there are very high chances that the problem may reoccur a couple of months down the line. Another con is poor resale value. This is a crossover that will not retain a higher chunk of its initial value, and that partly has to do with its CVT reputation. The next con is that it has an unreliable hybrid powertrain, so please just stick with the non-hybrids. Lastly, its diesel options are also not the best reliability wise, but the good thing is that they are not that common locally. Onto the CX-5, it's quite reliable, it's safe, it looks good, handles the road very well, and it has a premium build quality. The cons are, number one, it has limited interior space compared to the competitors. Secondly, its spare parts are a bit more expensive compared to competitors. In fact, did you know that some Mazda spares are actually more expensive than even Peugeot spares? The last con is that although the diesel powertrain has been improved in terms of reliability, it's still sensitive, and issues to do with DPF and turbo failure can still manifest. So with all that said, which crossover should you go for? Now picture this, you have around 2.5 million shillings. That amount can't get you a 2019 6.5, not even a 2019 Forester or Honda or even a RAV4, but you can get a 2019 X-Trail. Personally, if I have that amount of money and I really need a crossover, mark my words, I don't want, but I need a crossover, I'll just go ahead and buy the X-Trail, then install an aftermarket oil cooler as well as the temperature gauge, and I'll preferably go for the sportier version with the body kit. If I get that, I'll have saved myself close to 1 million shillings or more. But on the other hand, if I want a crossover and finances allow, then I'll just go ahead and get myself the good looking and sporty CX-5. So what I'm trying to say is this: the X-Trail is a crossover that you go for if you need a crossover. It offers better value for money considering the price. It's very spacious, comfortable, and can be relatively reliable if you take the precautionary measures. But the rest of the crossovers such as the CX-5, Forester, RAV4 and CRV are those that you go for if you want. Because if you want them, finances will have not to be an issue, as they mostly cost around 1 million or more than the X-Trail's asking price. What do you think? Do let me know your thoughts in the comment section. Which crossover would you prefer? Let me know. I hope this has been helpful. As always, if you have any inquiries, feel free to reach me via WhatsApp or email. Thanks a lot for watching. Stay safe, ride and drive safe. But please, before you go, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. See you in the next one.